So, Morgan, tell us, if we love inflation, how are we going to feel? Or if we hate inflation, how are we going to feel about stagflation?
That's right. You're going to love stagflation, right? Stagflation is going to be what takes us into the Great Reset, the New World Order, as it's now been called. It will be the order that comes out of, well, it will be the chaos out of which the new order comes, is the way I really should put it. Stagflation is where essentially inflation goes crazy and real wages are declining or staying the same. And you're just seeing that playing out in our country. And what is the answer to that? I mean, the problem is that people essentially cannot afford the essentials of life. And what do they do then? Where do we get to then? And really what I think will happen, because if that ultimately happened and they just weren't able to afford it, that's where you get things like food riots and revolutions, at least if we look back historically.
So that's when we've had periods of stagflation have been during those times, food riot, or like different times in history, we've seen this.
Well, all I'm saying is when people don't eat, when they don't have food to eat in history, when that's happened, then you have about 3 days before people start shooting people in the streets or attacking people in the street. This is historically speaking, it's a very short time span between when folks cannot afford the food. Now, we're not quite there yet, obviously, and I think there's probably going to be some countermeasures that are put into place. I don't know that the countermeasures are going to make it any better, but what I suspect that we'll start to see is price controls. We've talked about those on the show. From an economics perspective, price controls just simply never work, and there is a consensus about that. I get a little tired of arguing with people, who don't believe that because they just haven't looked at the data. They haven't looked at the studies. They haven't looked at the historical examples. Price controls simply don't work. Doesn't matter if it's in rent or if it's in consumer food or if it's in energy. Price controls result in less new supply coming online because why would you want to make whatever it is, new apartments, new food or new energy for people to purchase if you can't sell it at a market price? And by the way, everything that goes into making it, you're paying market prices for. You're paying market prices for labor, inputs, machinery, everything else to produce it. But now you can't sell what you're producing at a market price. You're selling it at a government set price. I mean, remember that? That's the command economy. That's the centrally controlled economy, the economic feature of the Soviet Union. That is communism when you have the government in charge of prices of goods and services. Yet that is what's being suggested. That's what I think we're going to see coming. And frankly, I think people are going to be clamoring for it. So what is that doing? They're herding us into clamoring for communism. Isn't that what's going to happen? We're going to say, come on, you have to make beef affordable. I can't afford my food. And listen, I get it. I hear you. That's an awful situation to be in. But the answer is not that the government comes in and sets prices, because then there's going to be even less food for you to purchase, thus driving food prices even higher or just inefficiently allocating the supply of food. So now it becomes people who get the special government dispensation to be the first ones in line to get the food. This is what happened in the Soviet Union, right? They had nice food stores, just only certain people could shop there. Only the party apparatchiks, only the party functionaries, the bureaucrats, they could shop at the nice stores. And your average person not only couldn't shop there, but didn't have the money anyway to shop there. So, I mean, this is the kind of two-tiered society that we can move towards, where you've got some people who are able to get the goods and services that they want and others who aren't. So beware of this drive to drive us into an economically, for an average family, working class, an economically unsustainable situation, and then for them to present the solution to that as price controls. We already see that, and I think there's going to be a three-tiered solution that they're going to try to present to us. Price controls is going to be one tier or one leg of the stool. I think they're going to say universal basic income is another leg of the stool. We already saw that with the COVID stimulus, the extended unemployment, all the waste, fraud, and abuse that went on in those programs as well. It's like money giveaways, and we could talk about that. We've had a lot of grifters show up and take a lot of that money and spend it on themselves, and I don't think we're going to get to the story, but we had some stuff on BLM and some other people who've done that, who've essentially stolen money, it appears, from good-hearted people who are trying to contribute to something bigger than themselves. But we're going to see a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in these government welfare programs, just like we always see. We always see that. Every government welfare program has got a huge amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. You can count on it every single time. So I think you're going to see universal basic income. We're going to give you some free money, quote unquote. There is no free lunch, right? But we're going to give you some free money. We're going to control prices. And number 3, we're going to need to replace the dollar, because the dollar is just not functioning well anymore. Why is it not functioning well? Oh, because we blew it out of the water, because we tripled the size of the national debt in the last 14 years. Think about that. Tripled the size of the national debt in the last 14 years. We created more money in the last about 2.5 years than had been created from the founding of the republic all the way up through the year 2004. So in 2.5 years, we created more money than those couple of hundred years plus, almost 300 years, not quite 300, but several, over 200 years since the founding of the republic. So what in the world are we doing? We're destroying the dollar. Is this on accident or is this on purpose? It's hard to believe that these things are on accident, because the path and the knowledge, the path is so well worn. We know what's going to happen when they do certain things. When they create a bunch more dollars and just helicopter money them out there and give them away, well, we know exactly what that leads to. That leads to what we're seeing, the destruction in the purchasing power of the dollar. And I just want to remind everyone, you've probably heard this before if you listen to the show, but inflation is not about prices going up, although that's how you experience it when you go to purchase things. But what inflation really is, if you want to understand it properly, is the purchasing power of the dollar going down. So a dollar just doesn't buy what it used to, and we can see that throughout the last 100 years. In fact, ever since the institution of the Federal Reserve, which then started handling monetary policy, which happened in the early 1900s, we've seen inflation, and then we saw it, of course, really accelerate once President Nixon took us off the gold standard. Now, I think what ultimately we'll see is the failure of the dollar, although I don't think it will fail completely, but I think it will fail to the point that they will suggest to us that we have to have an alternative, a more stable alternative, an alternative that the government controls, and it needs to be digital. Because they're going to sell it to us, stopping crime, stopping the funding of terrorism, stopping waste, fraud, and abuse, ease of use, everything. We need to get off of this paper money and get to a digital currency.
And then it's all tracked.
It's all taxed. And most importantly, like we saw in Canada, and this is really the key point in my mind, they can turn off your credits. You got 100,000 credits? I don't think so, Pat George. I heard what you said on the Morgan Streetman show the other day. You spoke out against the regime. Pat George, you now have 0 credits.
Or how about, hey, you want to buy this product or service from a person who we, the managers of the cryptocurrency, or we, the government, determine is not a good provider of service or goods, then we're going to knock you. We're going to dock you.
You're going to be cut off.
Wait, how far out do you think this is?
Okay, so that's a great question, right? Because on March 9th, your president, Joe Biden, released an executive order that he signed, and it requires the Treasury Department to study the development of a new central bank digital currency and produce a report within 180 days. That's 6 months. So they want a report from the Treasury Department within 6 months of March 9th of how we can create a new digital currency. And this will not be a blockchain cryptocurrency in the nature of a Bitcoin. This will probably not be on the blockchain. This will be something that doesn't involve a blockchain, because the whole point of the blockchain is you don't need to go through any sort of a centralized authority to transact in it. It's self-regulating from a transaction perspective. When something gets transferred to you, that then populates the rest of the blockchains around the world when you're talking about Bitcoin, so that now everybody who transacts in Bitcoin knows you own that Bitcoin.
What about hackers on this?
Well, what about hackers? That's a great question. It isn't like we've had government programs that have been completely hacker-proof, and I think you'll see You might see some hacking. You might see some cyber attacks. What I would think is maybe you see some of that leading into this. We've already been warned about a Russian cyber attack, and I don't know that we're going to get to the story. We'll try to get there as to what's going on in the Ukraine, but this is going to be like a digital dollar. I think they're going to call it something like the Fed coin, and, it's supposed to be designed. You got to love this because this is in the executive order. It's got to be designed to mitigate climate change and pollution and promote financial inclusion and equity. So what does that mean? Well, we don't know yet, but it means that they're going to try to control how you behave by controlling the currency. So maybe, hey, you want to shop at a white-owned business? There's a 25% premium on the purchases there, which we use to supplement non-white business owners because of systemic, historical, racial oppression in this country. Okay, so now you're going to have to pay a little more to go there. Well, a lot of people are going to say, well, then I won't go there. I won't shop there. Well, is that... and what are they doing? And you hate to make it about race because that's something I really wish that we could get past in this country is the racial animus that is being created by a lot of these identity politics, causing everybody to focus on their race and to focus on these concepts of oppression.
It could be about anything. It could be about we don't want you to shop at this one particular place because we don't like how they recycle their particular, they don't check the box on what we determine to be friendly to the earth.
You still want to have a gasoline-powered car instead of getting a Tesla? You still want to have a gasoline? We're going to have to charge you a premium, right? Because this Fed coin, and I'm just calling it that. Let's see what they actually call it. But the Fed coin has got to, per the executive order, has got to address issues of climate change. Now, how you do that with a currency, again, I don't see any way to do it other than controlling or trying to control the way that people spend their money. And I hear the music is coming, and it's too bad because we could stay on this topic. There's a lot more details that we could get into, some we talked about before the show. Folks, don't think this isn't coming down the pike awfully fast. Initially, it will exist in parallel with the U.S. dollar, but once they get a broad enough adoption, then they can just force you out of hard currency. Remember, the only thing that causes merchants to accept hard currency, forces them to accept it, is a law that requires that this is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That's on the face of your currency bills. You can pull it out and read it, and that could go away with the stroke of a pen in a day, and you could be forced into a Fed coin. We got more on the Morgan Streetman Show. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.